All right,
You can
recording
always
that.
cut it down later.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to. Are you doing the waiting room, Jenny, or do you want me to?
Uh,
As they
I'm
come
in the
in.
waiting room still, so I can do that.
Okay. All right, let me find the chat. And I'll put in my pumpkin spice latte response.
Pumpkin is so like the way y'all do pumpkin in this country is so funny to me.
Tell me more.
Well, I'm from Australia, and in Australia, pumpkin is not like a Halloween thing. Pumpkin is like a all year round thing. Like we treat it like squash. You put it in your curry, you make soup, and you all do it like sweet and
Yeah.
like decorative, and it's cute, but it's weird to me.
Do you like the sweet pumpkin things or do you prefer your pumpkin savory?
Think I prefer my pumpkin savory,
Okay.
but I don't know. I'm open. I'm open to it. The one thing I
Okay.
can never get on board with though is peanut butter and jelly. It's just
Oh,
I'll do it.
yeah. I've got one daughter that likes peanut butter and jelly, and the other one goes for sun butter and jelly.
Ooh, hey.
Yeah.
There you go. No, I should give the pumpkin spice latte a go.
Yeah. What about you, Jenny?
Um, I don't do coffee usually, so it's a
Okay.
weird phenomenon there. It's really good as a
Yeah.
dessert, must
Right.
say.
You can also drop in the chat where you are calling in for. Thanks for starting that off, Orville. Welcome. And I am calling in from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, on the east coast of the US.
Doylestown. The only place
Mhm.
I've been to in Pennsylvania is Philadelphia. I
Yay!
Is that where you are, Jenny?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice. I actually live in South Lake Tahoe, California, all the way on the other side.
Nice.
Almost as far away as you can get and still be in the same country.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're a couple minutes after the hour, so I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. This meeting is being recorded. And we are so happy to have Rebecca Barter speak with us on Code Like a Pro with GitHub Copilot. Um, this is an event for Our Ladies Philly, and Our Ladies is a worldwide organization that promotes gender diversity in our community via meetups and mentorship in a friendly and safe environment. And to be explicit, gender diversity includes, but is not limited to, cis, trans women, trans men, non-binary, genderqueer, and agender. So we are here for all gender minorities in our community. I am joined today by my lovely co-organizer, Jenny, and we would welcome you to get involved with Our Ladies Philly. So you can join our Slack community by emailing philly@ourladies.org. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can volunteer to be a speaker, mentor, or co-organize with us. And we are thrilled to have Rebecca here, and we'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be here. Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. I'm really excited to kind of show you all about GitHub Copilot. I originally come from Australia, as you can probably tell from the way that I talk. I'm currently at the University of Utah, and I do a lot of different things, a lot of data science education, a lot of kind of helping people with their healthcare research projects. And it's a lot of fun. I also wanted to do a little plug because I have a data science book coming out in 5 days. I'm going to post a little link in the chat in case anyone's curious. Here's the link if you feel like spending $80. And here's the link if you feel like not spending $80. The book is called Veridical Data Science. I wrote it with my PhD advisor and postdoc advisor, Bin Yu, who kind of developed this whole like veridical data science framework. And yeah, it's basically about how to do data science in the real world with real data using your brain. So, you know, if you're interested, give it a read. Um, but I'm not going to be talking about that today. Today, I'm going to be talking about GitHub Copilot and how I use it a lot. And I'm going to show you kind of how to use it in our studio, but it's very limited in our studio. So I'm going to show you in our studio because I assume since this is Our Ladies, a lot of people, I mean, I still use our studio a lot because I love it. It has a warm place in my heart. But most of the functionality of GitHub Copilot is actually available only in VS Code. So I'll kind of give a whirlwind tour of VS Code for those of you who are not familiar, but we're going to start off in our studio. I also want to pull up the Copilot website. Let me share my screen. Can you see my Chrome? Yeah, awesome.
Yes.
Hopefully it says Copilot, not Zoom, because I have a lot of screens in front of me. Um, so getting set up with Copilot, unfortunately, is a bit of a multi-stage process, and I'm not going to go through getting set up today, just because it is, we will be here all day. So there's a, hopefully, I shared a GitHub repository that has kind of some instructions, and let me actually pull that up as well. I can put that in the chat. But basically, so to get set up with GitHub Copilot, you need a GitHub account. You do not need to know how to use GitHub. You don't actually need to use GitHub at all to use GitHub Copilot, which is good. Oh no, my chat has disappeared.
I'll put that link in the chat for you.
Okay, thank you. There's too many things going on my screen. Yeah, so you don't actually need to know how to use GitHub Copilot, GitHub in order to use GitHub Copilot. It's just a product from GitHub, the company. So what you need to do in order to get set up with GitHub Copilot is you need to sign up for GitHub. You need to sign up for GitHub Copilot, which is separate. And unfortunately, Copilot is proprietary. So you have to pay money for it. It's not free. There is a free trial. So if you kind of click on the Get Started with Copilot and kind of go through the steps, you can get a free trial. There are also alternatives to GitHub Copilot, such as Codium, and that is spelled code. That's codium.com. It looks like pretty much the same website, but it's a different product. But they do pretty much the same thing. So if you don't want to spend money on GitHub Copilot, there are slight differences between them, like in for example, how they're trained and their privacy issues and stuff like that. I don't know too much about the Codium side of things. But if you want to try it out and you don't want to commit, you can do the free trial of Copilot. You can also check out Codium. And there's some instructions on that kind of GitHub repo that has been shared in the chat that has kind of just like base instructions of how to get these GitHub Copilot set up in RStudio and in VS Code. And Codium is only available in VS Code. It's not available in RStudio. So there's a lot of pros and cons. A lot of, you can do some things and other things and other things. But I'm going to kind of go ahead and get started and kind of show you just some functionalities of Copilot in RStudio. And then we'll move over to VS Code. So to kind of start, I also kind of just want to point out, like, what is Copilot? So if you have a Gmail account, you might have noticed that if you're typing emails, it's starting to kind of suggest things to type, right? Like you kind of start typing and it kind of, there's like grayed text afterwards. That's like, you can hit tab and like it will just like autocomplete for you. And like here you can kind of see this example on the Codium website. It's kind of, you start typing and it kind of suggests. So this kind of this kind of text suggestion is one of the main features of GitHub Copilot. So I'm gonna switch over to RStudio just to confirm you can see my RStudio window. Perfect. So I'm just gonna go ahead and open an R script. I could use a Quarto document. There is a Quarto document that I've put up on that GitHub page. If you want to check that out, I'll be doing a similar analysis. It's called hospitalanalysis.qmd. On that GitHub repo, you're welcome to kind of follow along. Again, because getting set up with Copilot is a bit of a trial, sometimes it is free if you're a student, by the way. This is going to be more of a like, unless you're already set up, this is going to be more of a watch, ask questions, kind of get a sense of what it can do rather than a follow along. So I wouldn't recommend trying to get set up super quickly in the next 30 seconds so that you can follow along. But definitely watch, and please do feel free to ask questions. And hopefully we can kind of get a sense of like the capabilities of GitHub Copilot. One thing that I will say is if you are learning a programming language, it can be super, super helpful. So I was learning Python, like kind of like around the time that this kind of came out. And I found it really, really useful, not so much for when I knew no Python, because then it's kind of like, well, I don't know really what I need, and is this giving me the right thing? But after I'd done that base level of like, I went through a textbook and like I learned a bunch of what you can do, especially with pandas. And then it would kind of I would find this useful to kind of remind me of like, oh, that's what I can do. This is how I do that thing. So like, it's really useful for learning. Uh, how to use a new programming language, but not necessarily if you don't already know it at all. Okay, so I'm going to get started. But before I get started, does anyone have any questions that they want to ask, kind of just anything you're curious about before I kind of show you how this all works? Cool.
Don't see any in the chat right now.
Perfect. Silence is my favorite flavor. All right. Okay, so in RStudio, the main thing that you can do with Copilot, so I've got Copilot set up. If you have Copilot installed, like I think the way that you get it set up is like tools, global options, and then there's a little Copilot thing down the bottom in the bottom menu here. So I've got Copilot enabled. This won't work unless you've got a Copilot account and you're logged in and stuff like that. But it's the way you kind of configure Copilot in your RStudio is in this kind of options panel. So that was tools. I don't know if you can see my top menu when I do this, but tools, global options. But okay. So the way that I kind of use Copilot is I tell it what I want it to do, mostly through code comments. So I'm going to kind of start. This is just a blank R script. I'm going to start a code comment, and I'm just going to say, okay, first thing I'm going to do is load the tidyverse because I always want the tidyverse. And after that, I just hit return. And I didn't type, my hands are up here, right? I didn't type this library tidyverse thing. It just did it for me. I'm like, I do want to load the tidyverse. So I'm just going to hit tab. And then, bam, now you're an expert at GitHub Copilot. So like, it just like, because I wrote a comment that said what I was going to do, it's like, oh, well, I know what you want to do next. I'm just going to like suggest that for you. When it's gray, it's suggesting, and I don't have to accept that suggestion. You know, like if I say I want to load the data in hospital data, I don't remember what the actual data file is called. It's still suggesting, like it's suggesting more text. I haven't written that word folder yet. It's gray. My cursor is to the left of it. If I want to accept that text, I can hit tab. If I say, nah, I don't want to write the word folder, I'm just going to like keep going. I can keep typing or I can hit return. Like it does, here's an interesting thing. Okay. It doesn't like, I don't have to accept its suggestions. So I've just started a new line, and it is suggesting that I create an object called hospital data using read_CSV, which is the CSV reader from the tidyverse. And it's suggesting this really long URL. I have no idea what that URL is. I did not like this is not what my data is. Like Copilot is amazing, but you also have to be careful. So for example, I was like writing some solutions to like some um, uh, like hypothesis testing problem for like a little mini course that I'm teaching. And like I was like literally writing out like, here's what the mean is equal to, here's the test statistic. And then it just like imputed a random p-value. And I'm like, no, 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 no. So like it's going to like I wish that it kind of would give me suggestions, but like show me a little bit like I'm pretty confident this is what you want versus I have to suggest something. I have no idea what you're going to write, so I'm just going to give you something, right? That's kind of what it's doing here. Um,
We
so
have
I'm going to go ahead and
two
start.
questions in the chat
Yes,
already.
please.
Okay, first question. Do you have issues with the Copilot suggested autocomplete overriding the RStudio suggested autocompletes for things like local data files?
So that is a great question, and let's find out because I was having this exact issue this morning. So yes, but not always. Okay, cool. And there's another question about the tidyverse read underscore CSV versus base R's read dot CSV. I suspect that if I hadn't written library tidyverse, yes, it probably would have done read dot CSV, but there's not really any way to know. Maybe if I went and deleted it and then I wrote it again, it would be different. And it's also like what it suggests for me might be different from what it suggests for you. Like it's like if you ask the same question to GPT a few times, like you get a different answer. I find in general, Copilot for code completion is a little bit more consistent. And I did do a demo a few months ago with a large group, and it mostly gave us all the same suggestions. But it will see things that is like above what I'm currently writing. Like it knows that I've loaded the tidyverse. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to try and load in some data. So let's load in a hospital data object. I'm going to use read underscore CSV. So I wish I could only accept that part of it. I don't want this now it's suggesting a different URL. Like now it's got a tiny, I don't know where it's getting this from. But I'm gonna save this file just so I can get my like code completion kind of stuff. Where am I? Okay, here we go. So now, like, if I'm just in here and I press, oh shit, sorry. If I'm in here and it hasn't suggested anything and I press tab, then it will bring up the files that I want. Like, usually I want, like, if I'm quick, nah, I don't think I can be quick enough. Like, I want to do that thing where I press tab and it's like, here's all the files you can load. And it's just like giving me like suggestions. I think maybe if I'm in here and then it suggests something. Yeah, so if I can get it to not suggest something, maybe I hit escape after it suggests something to remove the suggestion. Then I can get like where I need to go. I'm just going to change my working directory to the correct location right quick. I always do this one. Really, I should open folders in RStudio, but like, I forget. Okay, so I'm going to go just session, set working directory to source file location to make sure I'm in the right place. And now I'm going to hit escape and it doesn't work. Like, yes, this is annoying. Like that I can't do this. And so like this is one of those things where it's like it's a little bit of a trade-off. Like if I start typing, like the folder is called hospital data and I'm really quick. I hit tab, then it can get where I want to go. So I want to get into hospital data. And here I got like this is actually what the file is called that I'm looking for. But I also kind of want to show you right quickly, just in case you don't know. So because the data that I'm using is on that GitHub page, if I go to that GitHub page and I go into hospital data and I go into this CSV file and so this is the CSV file that I'm going to be loading and I hit view raw, it's going to pull up this file as like, this is just the contents of it as raw text. I can then take this URL and I can just plop that URL in here and it will load the data, except I have to load the tidyverse and then it will load the data. So like if you see some data on GitHub that you're like, oh, I want to load in that data, but I don't want to clone the repo, A, because I don't know how to do that, or B, because I'm lazy. I just want to pull that data. you can get that data just by going to the raw data file on GitHub itself and just take that URL. And now we've got this data set loaded and we can kind of take a look at it and we can see it's got a bunch of these column names. Like this is just data for hospitals that like report to, or you like have Medicare, something to do with Medicare. I know it's got something to do with Medicare. I found it online. There's information about the data set on the README file. But it's just like a data set. It's like the unit here, each row is a hospital. It's got information on the expenses of the hospital, the number of beds in the hospital, like all that kind of stuff. Like, is it rural versus urban? So it's like this data set's like pretty big. It's got 6,000 rows and like 117 columns. See, this is one of those things. So I just started a new line. Because I've practiced this, it knows what I'm about to do. Because when I wrote this last time, I was like, I'm going to tell it I want to use the janitor package. And I'm going to be like, is it going to know how to do that?
So when you practiced it, you had Copilot on.
Yes, I had Copilot.
Okay.
And so probably if you were following along, it wouldn't suggest this because this is specific, right? Like most people probably don't even know about the janitor package, which is why I'm showing you because it's cool. So last time I did this, I wrote hashtag use the janitor. I always say hashtag, it's pound symbol, whatever. Use the janitor package to clean the column names because I was like, that's cool. I want to show people the janitor package, but it remembers. So it learns from your code, which is really helpful actually. For doing a demo, it's not, but for like actually like if there's something that you do a lot, if you typically like always follow like a piece of code with another piece of code, like it's just going to remember that and it's going to be like, cool, yeah, I know what you want to do. And it does get better over time. But if you didn't know what janitor does, it has this really nice function called clean names. So if I look at my column names, it's like, there's capital letters, there's spaces, there's, all kinds of like inconsistencies. Like how am I going to write this column name, like total days, I'm not going to write any, I'm not going to remember what's uppercase, what's lowercase. So clean names is really nice. And it's because I haven't loaded the janitor package up here, it's like, it's using this kind of like, well, I don't even know what the word for it. Like it's
Namespacing.
extracting, yeah, what is it named?
Namespacing.
Namespacing, yeah. So it's like it's saying from this janitor package, I want you to use the clean names function. But if I remove this and I go up here, it kind of knows like, oh, I know what you're trying to do here. Like it was suggesting load the janitor package, library janitor, which is really cool. Like it's very clever, right? So here, if I look at hospital data now, I can see it's the same data, but my column names are like everything's lowercase. Spaces are now underscores. Like this is like tidy column names. This is very nice. I didn't have to do anything. So clean names from the janitor package, 10 out of 10 would use again.
There's a question in the chat, and it might have happened like while you're typing quickly and I missed something. But there's a question that says, so Copilot was giving you that metadata about the data set. And I don't quite remember what it was referring to.
Oh, was it? If you want to write in the chat what it was doing, I might have missed it as well. A lot of things happen quickly with Copilot. See, this is terrible for a demo. It's like this is exactly the comment that I was going to write next. This is very annoying. To be fair, I also have another window open on a screen behind me that has all of these comments, and so it might be able to see those. That could be what's happening. Yeah, I have no idea. Cool. Yeah, sorry, Patrick. I don't think I saw what it was, but feel free to, if you see anything else, if you see it happen again, just point us there. Cool. Okay. Okay, so the next thing that I was going to do, so like the way that I use Copilot in general in RStudio is like I'll write a comment and I wish I could like make it go away. I swear if I just hit escape, it should just disappear, but that clearly doesn't happen. So like typically what I will do is I will like, I'm just gonna change this from number to proportion. Ha, take that. All right. So this is terrible for a demo because it's like because
Go
originally,
with
okay,
it. Go
originally
with it.
it was like using summarize, and I was gonna be like, okay, let's like change that to like map and like that's very funny. Okay, so it's giving me a really nice suggestion. Here it's saying, oh, I know what you want to do. You want to use a map function to compute the proportion. And you can, if you have zeros and ones to compute a proportion, you can just compute the mean. So it's like, that's really clever. Cool, thanks. I don't love that it's giving me this old pipe as opposed to the new pipe. And in several of the examples, it was giving me like, if it was 3 lines, sometimes it would give me like the old pipe, and then the next line would be the new pipe, and then the next line would be the old pipe. And it's like, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Like even before it knew what I wanted to do, it was giving me like most of these suggestions. Like after I write the comment, it's like, oh, I think this is what you want to do. And it used summarize all instead of map underscore DBL, but like, sure, that works. Like there's a lot of different functions. If you don't know the map function, by the way, like if you've never seen this syntax before, what this says is like if I run this, this is giving me a numeric vector that for each column in my data, let me scroll all the way up to the top. For each column in my data, each column is like this dot is like a placeholder for the column. It's computing the function that's within my map DBL, and the tilde at the front says this is like an anonymous function. This is just a function. The dot is the argument of the function. And so it's computing for each column is.na. And then for each column, it's like now we've got trues and falses for if it's NA, and it's computing the means of those trues and falses. And it returns all of those values for each column as a numeric vector. So like I use this. This is like how I compute missing values in each column. So like highly recommend. Like it's just 1 line of code. It's super easy. Like you don't have to do anything crazy. I really like this. One thing that I will often do, so like we've kind of seen like, okay, like it's been really good so far at like predicting like, okay, you want to do one row, like 1 line stuff. So like I'm gonna try and type, I was like, I'm gonna try and type faster than it. There is no way I can type faster than that. So let's pretend you can't see this. And I'm like, I want it to write a function to visualize pairwise scatter plots for 2 variables, sure, at a time. And it can just give me an entire function. And the thing that I don't like about this is it's not going to work. What's AES string? I don't think that's a thing. So like it is not perfect. And the first time I did this, it gave me it without these things. And then this was going to be like it did this. And I was going to be like, okay, well, first of all, this isn't going to work because ggplot is a tidyverse function, and it wants variables without quotes. But you can't give a regular function variables without quotes. So I was going to be like, we need to use tidy evaluation. And I was going to be like, it would be really nice if I could like highlight this and tell it to change it. If I could say, you've given me this thing and it's almost what I want. It's almost what I want, but can you please change it in this way? So this is where our ability to do things in our studio comes to an end, because we can't do that. Like all we can do in our studio with Copilot is this code completion. Is like, I'll like start typing a comment, or I'll just like start typing some code and it can suggest what the next thing I want to type is.
So
However, yes,
go
please.
ahead. No, you go.
No. I was just going to say, in VS Code, there is a lot more that you can do. So we're going to switch over from our studio to VS Code. But I would love to like answer any questions that are popping up.
Yeah, so I just looked up AES string, and it's actually a deprecated function.
Oh, there you go.
And there was a question about how does Copilot differ between scripts and Quarto or R Markdown? Where does it make the suggestions, like in a chunk or outside of a chunk?
Yeah, so in Quarto, it will just like, if I open a Quarto document right quick, it'll just like, if I create a chunk here, all right, it wants me to do things. You know, I can like, it just gives me the suggestion. Like it's like, this is still just a raw text document. And so even if I'm like outside of it and I start typing like today, it can give me suggestions of just text as well. Um, cool, thanks. I am not going to do that, but that was a nice suggestion. Another day. So you can use, it does the exact same thing. This is all just text. It's raw text characters, and it's just suggesting the next text characters that it wants to come, like that it thinks should come afterwards. Okay, well, it turns out AES string is a thing, but it's not what I wanted. I didn't want it to do it this way. So we're going to move over to VS Code, and I'm going to show you like the things that I actually think are even more useful than the code completion. Code completion is nice, but if you know what you're doing, it's like, yeah, okay, cool. Like it speeds up things a little bit, but if you need help, it's not that helpful. So let's move over to VS Code, which if you've never seen VS Code before, it looks like this if you have my theme. If you don't have my theme, it probably just looks dark. I have an issue with the dark one because I'm like, I can't see what is connected to what. Um, the interface, I think, is both good and bad, is my conclusion. If you are a big R fan and you also are a big VS Code fan, you should probably know about Positron, which is Posit's new IDE, not technically replacing RStudio, but maybe one day. It is in beta mode still. So it's still got bugs and I honestly tried to download the most recent version and I could not get it to install. So, you know, be aware of it, but it's not ready for general use yet. But it is a fork of the same thing that VS Code is a fork of. Like it's kind of like using it's got the same bones as VS Code. But as you will see as we use R in VS Code, R in VS Code is not great. Like if I'm like here on the right is like my R console. I it doesn't have any like I like that like in RStudio I've got like red and blue and like gray and black. Like that's really nice. In VS Code, everything's just black. Like it's hard, it's a lot harder to look at. Theoretically, there are extensions that fix that. I have not gotten one to do that for me yet. In Positron, I think R is a lot nicer, but you cannot use GitHub Copilot in Positron. You may eventually be able to use Codium, which is the alternative to GitHub Copilot. But for now, if you want all of GitHub Copilot's functionalities, you got to be in VS Code, which, I like VS Code, but it's, I think, better for Python than it is for R. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open that same file we were just opening in. So one thing about VS Code is if you are opening things, you typically want to be opening a folder. And I kept having issues because I was like, why can't it find my things? How do I change the working directory? And like, turns out if you just open a folder, everything is nicer. And how do I get to my files? Okay, if I go to Explorer, because I opened a folder, it looked like nothing happened, but something did happen. It kind of opened up, like if I click on these files, it can see all of the files in that folder. And that file I was working in, I didn't give a name. It was just untitled.r. So I'm going to say goodbye, Explorer. And here is our R script that we were working on. And that's really nice. I've got all these squiggles because I have, I think these squiggles are either from, I think they are like code spell. I don't remember. I have extensions and they're annoying me right now, but we're going to live with it because I don't know how to turn it off. But it's basically like trying to like check my grammar. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run everything in this file just so we're up to the same place that we were before. So I'm going to load the tidyverse and you can see, oh, it's got colors. Thank you for colors. I'm going to load janitor and I'm going to load in my hospital data. And we can take a look at the hospital data. And you can see, this is kind of like same output as I would have in my R console. I can use my janitor to clean the names. And now we've got our lowercase names. I can use mapdbl, and now we've got our long vector. Like it's all just like pretty much the same. Like this is my R script on the left. This is my console on the right. I do wish you can move the panes around, but it's a little less flexible. I am going to, uh, I'm just gonna like ignore this function for now because there's something else that I want to show you. So I want to ask Copilot. I can still do the same thing. I've got Copilot enabled in VS Code. So if I start a comment, and I write a comment, like maybe I want to, let's do a thing. I'm saying compute which hospital has the highest cost to charge ratio. And it would not have known that I was going to write that had I not already written it, but I had already written it. So let's pretend I've just written this comment, and I can hit return, and it's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. So the first time I did that, it just gave me this. And this returned when I ran this. So cost to charge ratio is like this is literally a column in my data. And I run it in the console, and it returns an empty tibble. So if it says 0 times 2, it says it's got 2 columns and 0 rows. And so I'm like, okay, I wonder why that is. I can ask Copilot. So this is where VS Code differs from RStudio. You see this little like star thing that appears on the left? This thing here, this is like, I can ask Copilot to modify my code. So if I hit that, it's getting overwritten by this other thing. And this thing is like a VS Code thing. So there's actually a shortcut. So because my stars disappeared, if you can see the star, you can just hit the stars. But if I hit like Command I or Apple I or Alt I, depending on what kind of computer you're on, this thing comes up. This is what would happen if I hit those stars, and it says, ask Copilot. And so what I can do here is I can tell Copilot what I want it to do to my code. So here I can be like, I know what the issue is. I figured out what the issue is. The issue is here I'm trying to find the hospital that has the highest cost charge ratio. I'm doing that by filtering to the value of cost charge ratio that is equal to the maximum cost charge ratio, but there are missing values. So really, I just need that max function to like have that na.rm argument, but I'm going to tell Copilot to do that for me in words. So I'm going to say, like add na.rm equals true to the max function to ignore missing values. So I'm just writing this in plain text. I can hit this send button or just enter, and it's going to think for a minute. And notice that it's highlighted this line, and it's added a piece of code. It's added na.rm equals true, and I can choose to either discard this change or accept this change. I'm going to say accept, and now it has na.rm is true. I can run my code again, and this time I can see that this is the hospital that has the highest cost charge ratio. It's Methodist Ambulatory Surgical Hospital. Cool. So like I just told it to do a thing, and it just did it, which is actually really rad. I could say
that suggestion you put in was so specific, right? Like, so like how does it handle something more vague?
Yeah. So for example, like I could also like also give me like where the hospital is in like the columns. Also give me columns that tell me where the hospital. Maybe it'll figure it out. Well, it did kind of figure that out. Like it's added columns. It says, okay, well now I'm also going to give you state, city, zip code. So I can accept that.
I think that was quite similar to the question in the chat. Like, what if you didn't know that the argument was na.rm equals true? Can you just leave that part out and ask it to ignore missing values?
Yeah. Yeah. So I can totally do that. Like if I wrote here, like ignore missing values in the max function, Or even if I said like not in the max function, probably it would be able to figure that out. Like it's pretty flexible. But here I told it to like give me some columns about like where the hospital is. But like it kind of knows about the data, but it also kind of doesn't know about the data. Like it's just assuming that the column names that I need are state, city, and zip code. So it's got city correct and zip code, but state is actually state code, and it didn't get that quite right. But if I like, change that, it's like, oh, whoops, this is state code. Then it can kind of like show me things. So I can see that's in Texas. Cool. Like you can do like one thing that I'll often do, like if I wrote like, I want to plot hospital data, number of beds, like this is just using base R plotting. And I'm like, here's a scatter plot. This scatter plot, this is a thing that I find annoying about VS Code, is the scale. There's like a argument. I'm looking for it. I wrote it down somewhere because I can never remember what it is. So code. Okay, so there's this argument that I can give, which just says, so this is also annoying. I don't like all of these columns. Ideally, I want to be able to put this plot underneath my console, and I can't do that, but I can put this plot just by dragging it underneath my code. But if I run this piece of code that says it's an running options function by setting the width and the height of the plot, and then I run my plot, I can change the size of the plot. But like I really like in RStudio how it automatically chooses the size, and it's usually pretty good. VS Code, at least with R, does not. So this function is like super helpful for like changing the kind of size of the plot. But if I do here are my stars, I highlight this plot function and I say, I try to click on my stars and it doesn't work. Oh no, it's doing that thing where I can't get to my Copilot chat. Maybe if I right click and then I say Copilot and then I say, no. All right, well, I want to do the thing and it's not working. This is what I was saying. So VS Code's being a little bit buggy. So I'm gonna like super quickly quit and reopen because this is really cool and I want to show you. Okay, I quit. We're gonna reopen in VS Code. And I'm gonna run some code, maybe eventually, if it lets me. There we go. Load the tidyverse. It's thinking. Yay, things are happening. Okay, so let's go back. Oh no, it's just gonna do it again, isn't it? Hospital data. Number of beds, hospital data, total. Let's do like, I don't know. I just choose a random column. I get my plot. If I want to use Copilot to so ideally I would be able to like, oh, here we go. Okay, we got there. I don't know why it wasn't working before, but we're there now. So if I'm going to say, okay, do this using ggplot, it's going to take my base R code and it's going to be like, oh, it's because I have that function. It's like, okay, no, I don't want to use pairwise scatterplot. Use geom point. Sometimes it's too clever for its own good. Okay, let's try again. Use geom point from ggplot. Live demos are the best. So it's trying to use pairwise scatterplot, which we've defined up here. And so maybe if I delete that function, it will do what I want. Use geom point from ggplot. Here we go. Okay, so now it's taken my code and it's given me ggplot code. I don't know why it's indented it. But it's just like taken that plot function and it's just like turned it into ggplot code. And now it's giving me this plot in ggplot, which is that kind of thing I use all the time. It'll be like, I know how to do this thing for like one column. Like I'll do a thing for one column, then I'll say, okay, now scale this up and just write the code that will do it for all of the columns, for example. Like it's really powerful, but as you can see, it's definitely not perfect. Sometimes like this is why I say like if you already are familiar with the programming language, it's super, super helpful. And if you've got that base familiarity and you want to like remember how things work, it's helpful. But if you're new to the programming language, honestly, I think it's just kind of confusing. But I can now take this and I can do something like add a vertical line for the hospital whose name starts with Barton Memorial, which is my local hospital. I'm like, I want to see like where on this, or like add a point, not a vertical line. That doesn't make any sense. Add a like point, red point, add a big red point. How about that? Like I can kind of like tell it to do whatever I want. And so it's giving me this suggestion. It's saying, so it's got my original geom points layer, and now it's adding another points layer where it's filtering to the hospital and using str starts. I guess that's a function. I've never used that function. We'll find out, won't we? And it's trying to like fill that in for me. And it's saying the color is red, the size is 4. And so I'll accept it and I'll run my code and look down here. This is my hospital. Like it's pretty cool if you know what you want and you can look at the code and you can be like, I think that's going to do what I told it to do. So like it can be really cool, it can be really frustrating. It can be a little bit of both. One other final thing that I want to show you is the chat function. So I've shown you kind of code completion. I've shown you this like you hit the stars or you use like Command I to like tell it to do something to modify your code. One other thing that I can do is also like if I do my Command I and I write /document, like sometimes I'm really bad at writing code comments, right? Like I'm like, I'll write the code and then I just like didn't comment it adequately. I can use this /document and it will write code comments for me. So it's written. This script generates a scatter plot. This plot includes, it's highlighted this Barton Memorial Hospital. Like it's writing code comments for me. It's documenting my code, which is really cool. I love that. The final thing I want to show you is the chat. So the chat is, I got there by just this like little chat icon on the left. This is like ChatGPT, but it knows about your code, right? So I can say, what analysis should I do next? Or something like that. It can look at my code and it can be like, oh, maybe you should compare the number of beds and the total bad expense. Or, like you can do a regression model. I mean, it's not very creative because it's really only talking about like the 2 variables I've told it about. But I can ask it, okay, like I'm like, what is total bad debt expense in this data? I'm curious if it can answer that question. Like I don't actually know what this means. Like it doesn't really tell me anything. But like I can ask it like all kinds of questions like about like there's a column in the data called like hospital. Here, let's do this. Hospital data, like I think it's like cost to charge ratio. And I can like take this and I can be like, make a histogram of this variable. And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, here's a histogram of that variable. And it shows me nothing. And I'm like, gee, thanks. I know why. It's because the bin width is too small. I don't know why it suggested this bin width. I can be like, like I can just delete this, or I can be like, I wonder like what would happen if I like told it like this isn't showing me any data, like fix the bin width, but now I'm running into this issue where I can't get back into the the chat thing. Okay, here we go. So the plot, oops, looks blank. Fix it. Yeah, it's giving me some like suggestions that are useless. So like sometimes it does things that are helpful and sometimes it doesn't. But I can ask it like, what is the cost to charge ratio for a hospital? Because like surely this is a thing. And it actually gives me a lot of really useful information. Well, at least it did last time I asked this question. This time it hasn't. So, I mean, it says like it's a financial metric used to compare the costs incurred to the hospital versus the charges billed to the patient. So it's like it's essentially ChatGPT. But it also can like see my code, which is really nice. And if I do get rid of this bin width thing because I know what it's supposed to look like, I can see that I'm going to run this options line to make my plot a little bit smaller. And now I can actually see things. I can see it's like, first of all, I hate that blue, but whatever, that's not, I didn't choose it. But it's also like, it's like got a lot of outliers. So I'm going to be like, okay, can you remove particularly large values? And it's essentially saying, okay, we're only going to give you the 99 up to the 99th quintile. Last time it did 95th quintile, so it does something different every time. I can run this code, and maybe I can run this code, but also maybe not. It's giving me an error. For some reason, missing values are not.
RM?
So maybe here I can do like fix/fix will often fix your code, but it has to understand what the issue is in the first place. Like all it did was fix the indentation, you know. So it's not perfect. Maybe is there an NARM? It's suggesting that. Let's try it. Now it worked. So code completion knew what I needed to do, but the chat thing did not. So like basically, like I think GitHub Copilot in summary is amazing, but it's also like you think about like how far we've come in the last year and a half, like we've come a really long way, but I think there's a long way to go. Like clearly that is like obvious, right? Like this is not perfect, but at the same time, like this thing of like I'll write one little thing and I'll be like, I want you to like make this way more sophisticated. It does a pretty good job of that. You know, like I went from like I know a lot of people who like they are trying to like transition from base R to tidyverse, and like they'll write their code in base R and then they'll be like in this like little chat thing they'll be like well it's not always, I don't know why it's not always coming up. But VS Code's being a little bit of a butt. But like, you know, they'll be like, make this the tidyverse. And it does. Like generally it's really good at that kind of thing. Like it's good at things that like there's a lot of documentation for online, and it's not good at things that there is not a lot of documentation for online, or things that are like kind of very niche and specific. Like it's a tool. It is not going to replace you. If you're coming here thinking like, oh no, like I need to learn how to use this thing because it's going to replace me, like hopefully it's pretty clear that that is very far from where we are. But at the same time, like I find it to be really, really useful. But I think a big part of that is because I already am familiar with the programming language. Whereas like I did find it really useful for like when I was learning Python, like the code completion thing, it's like, oh, I know what's the name of this function. Like I start typing it and it will like give me the actual name, or like I can use the little like comment thing, or I can just go into the chat and be like, what function do I need to do this thing? And I found it to be really, really helpful. I think it really did speed up my ability to become proficient. Like from that stage of like, I know what the functions are, but I'm not quite remembering how to use them or when to use them. it got me from that stage to I know what I'm doing, I think a lot faster than I otherwise would have gotten there. Um, but I think it's still a work in progress. I think Codium is very similar if you do want to try play with Codium. The thing that I find myself doing most is I'll write code and I will use this kind of like, this Ask Copilot thing to just beef up my code or document my code. And like it does save me a lot of time. But it does take getting used to, and figuring out how you want to use it is going to be different for everyone. But yeah, I would love to hear any questions that anybody has.
Yeah, I'll give
Uh,
you some.
yeah.
Awesome. All right, question number one. Does your data set get included into the GitHub prompt, and then it would become part of their training data?
This is a very good question, and I totally meant to talk about this at the beginning. So there's a lot of controversy about that, right? And so if you are using really sensitive data, I would say probably you don't want to be using Copilot, because I think the answer to that question is yes. There is a box that you can check that says, don't use my code to train your LLM, but at the same time, like I don't trust them to not see everything that I'm doing. So like if you are working with really, really sensitive data, like especially like healthcare data, where it's like there are really, there are like a lot of privacy issues with healthcare data, I would suggest switching off Copilot or having a version like you don't have Copilot in it. So I never use it if I'm working with sensitive data, and I think that's generally the advice. um, but at the same time, like if you're not working with like the actual data, or you're just like prototyping, like you're just writing code and it can't actually like get to the data, like it's fine to just like, this is also like personal comfort. Like some people are like, I want it to get better. I want it to see my code. So it like learns from me. I want to help this thing. And like I'm a little bit in that camp, but it really depends what kind of project I'm working on.
Right. General question, do you think the benefits of using Copilot in VS Code overcome the challenges of using VS Code in comparison to RStudio?
For me, what I do, if I'm using R, I'm using RStudio, and I'm honestly not even using the code completion that much, but I've been using R for over 10 years, and I am really, really proficient in R. But if I'm using Python, which I am less proficient in, um, I much prefer doing it in VS Code where I have access to the Copilot, because I find it really helpful. Like I will be writing some code and I'll be like, I can't remember how to do this thing, because it's not just like, it's not a second language to me yet. It's like, I'm still like, I'm just like, it's not ingrained in me. And so like having access to this thing where I'll like write the thing and I'll know what's wrong. I'll write some code, I'll know what's wrong, and I'll just use the Copilot thing to be like, fix this, and it does. And 85% of the time, which is high, but not high enough, maybe 85% of the time, it does exactly what I want it to do. And then the rest of the 15% of the time, which is still a big amount, and I think that amount is going to decrease over time. It doesn't, but like that 85% of like the time it does what I want it to do and it really does help me, I think is worth it. But again, like if I'm using R, I still mostly use RStudio. I don't really need this stuff. But if you're newer to R, you might find it helpful, and you might want to try, like I don't actually know. Does anyone know if you can use Codium in Positron? I don't know if you can. And if you can't now, you probably maybe will be able to one day. You can? Okay. So if you can, like that's something that I would suggest. So Codium is essentially like GitHub Copilot, but they aren't proprietary. It's free. You can have it, like they're creating versions and other things. So if you want to try out Positron and you can get it to install on your computer, and you want to try out a version of Copilot, and like I think Codium tries to be a little bit more like we don't train our models on things that we don't have permission to, and stuff like that. You might want to try that out. Okay, yeah, perfect. Thanks, Travis. Yeah, so in the chat there's a link to using like code completion in Positron. So I think, yeah, it's My suggestion is try it out and try it out for a week. And if you find it useful, you can kind of, you'll like within a week, you'll kind of get a sense of like, yes, this is helpful for me, or no, this is hindering me. And I think it does depend a lot on what level you're at. Like, everyone's at a different level. Everyone needs different things and needs different levels of help. So try it out and maybe it'll be useful to you. I mostly find it useful for Python because I'm not as good at Python. I think,
All
yeah.
right. There was a question in the chat that was kind of a joke, but I think it's an interesting question. Have you ever used Copilot to write unit tests for you?
Um, no, but you can. Like literally,
Yeah.
like there's also like I can right click Copilot, like I can generate tests. I can ask it to explain my code. Like, what is this doing? And it will go in the chat and it will be like, this is getting a histogram with this histogram function, and then it's the labs function. Like that's also really helpful for if you're learning. Um, so like it has a lot of really good features, but like all, AI today, like it's a work in progress. But it's pretty cool.
Yep.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much. We so appreciate your time and showing us how to use it. This has been awesome. We can go ahead and stop the recording. Do you know where that button is, Jimmy?